Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 75. Thank you so much for bearing with me. This episode is a little later than usual. It's been a super busy weekend full of nature journal events, and I wasn't able to get this episode out exactly on schedule, but here we are, and I'm so excited to share today's interview with you. My guest is Gargi Chugh. I'm thrilled to have had the chance to speak with Gargi this week because hers was some of the first pages I saw when I first joined the Nature Journal Club Facebook group, which is a huge community of journalers from all around the world sharing inspiration and information about their nearby nature. Gargi's pages have always inspired me, and I feel like I'm looking at the world in a whole new way when I look at her journal. She is a data analyst by profession, and this comes through in her nature journal pages. She's looking for patterns and asking questions that I would never think to ask. This interview brought me so much joy. Gargi has some really wonderful stories, the best of which is how she and her husband Akshay first met John Muir-Laws, who's a mentor to so many nature journalists and the author of The Laws Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling. I know this story is going to make you smile. Let's listen. Thank you so much for being here with me, Gargi. I'm so excited to chat with you and go deeper into all your nature journal adventures. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I honestly feel so excited and so humbled and so honored to be here because I've heard some of your podcasts. And the first time you asked me if I wanted to talk, I was like, "Ah, are you sure you want me to come talk in your show? Because you've had such amazing artists, and all of those people have been such inspirations in my nature journaling journey. So I am very excited to be here. Thank you.
It's funny you say that because you are a huge inspiration to me. So just know that as we go forward.
Thank you.
So I always go back and I talk about nature in early life of my guests, and I wonder if nature is something you've always had with you, or if it's something you came to later in life.
So that's an interesting one for me because I have grown up in India.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, India is so biodiverse. There's all of these beautiful birds and insects because of how humid the climate is. And we've grown up seeing that and squishing cockroaches our way. So we've been in nature, but I have never seen nature the way I see or I have learned to see it now. So I often joke about how we've developed a new pair of eyes in the past four or
Mm.
5 years because we've lived in it. But if you had asked me to name a few birds that I see around me during my childhood, I would have said crow and pigeon and sparrow, and that would be it. Now I go back and I'm like, I grew up in this place. So I know
Yes.
more about it. And I'm so glad that nature journaling helped me discover that. But I was always this person who would go out and look at nature and be in front of a beach. And like when I remember, look back at my memories and think of all the trips I've had with my friends or my family, I always remember being the one who could sit in a spot, like be at the beach, look at the waves, smile for hours thinking about just how the waves are moving, how the trees are swaying, and like looking at each individual leaf and just feel so excited. And one thing that was common in all of these stories is I just was sitting having tears rolling down my face.
Oh,
Because I was so happy to be there in that moment and I was so excited to just exist and get the chance to see nature the way it was in front of me. So I've always had a special love and excitement about being in nature. but it was always very superficial until very recently, where I learned how to explore it more deeply. And that's, of course, added a lot more dimensions to how I see it now.
Mm-mm. I love what you expressed about just the joy of existing, because that's one thing that nature journaling really helps with for me and for others too. I know just that appreciation, just that realization, because it's easy for us to go through life and even forget that we're on this planet spinning through space and all these incredible things are happening around
Yes.
us. And just to have that realization is actually something really precious and something to cherish.
Mhm.
Tell me the story of how you came to nature journaling.
So I already told you about how I was around nature.
Mm.
Um, as a child, my parents would always send us to art classes. That was a thing that we all did as kids. Just go to art school, learn how to draw, how to paint. I was always terrified of watercolors because every time I tried to paint with watercolors, I would mess up so badly. I was always terrified of drawing human figures. So for me, it was like, these are two things I'll stay away from. I'll use crayons, I'll use poster colors, I'll use like everything else, but that was like my art side of story. Now, speaking of how I discovered nature journaling, that's a very, very funny story, actually. I don't know if you've ever heard it from us, but my husband, Akshay, he's also into nature journaling, and we journal together. And we both started at the same time. And Akshay's aunt has been journaling for around 20 years. And all we
Ah.
knew about 5 years ago was Lena auntie likes to sketch birds. So one day we were at a bookstore trying to get a book for a friend for her birthday. And we were like, art section, of course we have to go there. And Akshay also liked to sketch at that point. We both bonded over sketching a lot. So we see this book on the shelf, we take it in our hand, we see this amazing, amazing tips on like how to draw birds, how to draw animals, leaves, and it just had everything. And we saw that book, and Aksha's like, we should buy this book for Lena Auntie and take it for her. And we're like, okay, maybe we should snap a picture, check with her if she already has it, because there's a good chance that she might. So we take that picture, go to her place when we see her next time, and we're like, Auntie, have you seen this book? We really wanted to get this for you. She's like, you know what? Come inside. We'll talk about this a little more. And she's smiling, and she's a very social person, so she has guests at her place, and they're sitting there, and she shows them the phone. She's like, uh so these kids here want to buy me this book. What do you think? Should I get it? And this human being sitting there, this man is smiling, and he's like, of course. And we just start talking about how amazing we think that book is. And then she says, by the way, meet the author. This is
No.
George.
Really?
So funny in that moment. First, I thought she was joking, and I'm
That's
like, no
crazy.
way. I am meeting the author of this super amazing book. So we start talking to him, and then there's this conversation going where Lena Auntie's kids, so our cousin, she says, I find it so hard to think in terms of images, and words are so much easier, but when you say sketch note, that can sometimes get so hard to do. He's like, you know what? Let's do a workshop right here, right now. And we all take a piece of book, and we're sitting there, and he's like, okay, let's think of words. And then we had this short exercise, and I was blown away. I- Akshay and I looked at each other. We're like, we have to find this man. We have to stuff him in every single class and like spend as much time as we can with him because he is so phenomenal. So that's what we did. We found a nature journaling workshop that he was taking the following month. And I still remember that day. It was, he was teaching how to draw wildflowers. That was our first ever time nature journaling. And we have no idea how to think about it. So we go to the class, and he is talking about funnels and how you can make your drawings more three-dimensional by, using funnels. And they're like such simple approaches. Why did I never think of this? So simple, so effective, and I suddenly see my flower looking like a flower. So I'm excited. And after the class, there's this gathering for journal share. And my first question was, so what is nature journaling? What am I supposed to be doing? And he smiles. And then there's a bunch of other people, and they're like, oh, this is the hardest question. I'm like, why is it? Why? What is so hard about it? Um, but that happened, and that's the day my journey towards trying to understand what nature journaling is started. And I would say I'm still not at a stage where I understand what it means to me, because it has evolved and it has changed so much in all of these years, month over month. But the other thing I remember about that day was someone said, Jack, I really like the shirt that you're wearing. And he says, if you like it, you can have it. And he just takes off his shirt and he gives it to that person. And there's
That
this
is so
other,
Jack.
that is so him now that we know him. And then there's this other lady who's like, you know what, you can have my jacket since you don't have anything to wear right now. She takes off her jacket, gives it to Jack. And then someone else is like, I have an extra hoodie in my bag. Let me get that for you. And everyone starts exchanging everything that they own. And that was the day I was like, this is it. I have found my tribe. This is the type of people I want to surround myself with. And I felt so much joy in just being there with those people, seeing the kindness. Jack, after the class, said, if you cannot afford my book, just take it, pay it back in kindness. I'm like, who does that? Um, so there's just so many things from that one day where I look back and I remember them so clearly, and I remember why I journal and why I like being in this community so much. Um, so yeah, that's how I discovered nature journaling, and that was the day I that made me stick with it till date.
That is an amazing story. I haven't heard that story before. And the fact that you got your own personal introduction
Yeah, that was
with
great.
Jack sitting there, that is just wild. And then that introduction to the community as well, that it's all about the heart, that it's all about giving and sharing and caring for each other. I love that story. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for telling that. Oh my goodness. So so now I'm wondering about your personal journey with nature journaling. So you said it's really evolved through your time, and uh, I'd love to hear about that evolution, how it has evolved, what's changed, what's worked, what hasn't, and yeah, just about the story of how your personal journaling has evolved.
Uh, it's so fun to go back and think about how we started, because it's also so humbling to think about, oh my God, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
So the first few months when we were journaling, um, I remember Akshay and I would go with the group once every month. We would click photos of everything that we wanted to sketch, come back home, and it would take us at least 2 days to finish our page. But there was this initial beginner excitement of, oh my God, I just want to get this done. So we would take two days and it would be fine. Slowly we started to lose patience, like, oh
Mm.
my God, we cannot put 2 days into this, and this so we start to try to sketch in the field. And I'm drawing all of these flowers. I first of all, I don't even attempt to draw anything that's moving. Like, that is too difficult. So I'm sticking with my leaves, with my flowers, focusing on pretty pictures. And there's all of this pressure of, I have seen these beautiful, beautiful posts on Instagram and on Facebook of people putting these pictures, and they're so good. And I want to be able to produce something. I want people to like what I am putting on that page. And there was all of this pressure of trying to make a pretty picture. And I would occasionally feel that, and I would talk about it with people in the community. So by that time, I had made so many friends, and we would talk about these things. So one of them said, okay, why don't you come and like do this workshop? So we started taking more workshops around how to draw birds, it started to feel a little more approachable, but we were still at a stage where we were taking a day or two to complete our pages, whatever it means, complete a page. um, and after about a year of being there, we started seeing some improvement in speed and the quality of our drawings. But then the Africa trip happened. The nature journaling, so John Muir Laws organizes these nature journaling trips where we go as a community and spend like 10 days sketching something. There was no way we were going to survive with photos and like taking 2 days to sketch. So we started meeting people in the community. There's Susan and all of these people who had gone to the trip, and they said, okay, you just get like 30 seconds to sketch something. And that was the first time ever that we set a goal for ourselves that we now want to start sketching within 30 seconds of seeing the subject. We started putting timers. Every evening we would go and we're like, okay, today we'll take 2 minutes to sketch something. Today we'll take 1 minute. And eventually we reached a point where after 6 months, this is 6 months of practicing at least twice every week, like minimum. And we just like look forward to finishing our day at work, going at our desk, looking at an elephant and trying to like make it look like an elephant every day. And by the end of 6 months, we were there within 30 seconds. We were able to put a timer and sketch, and that changed how we approached. There was suddenly so much more time to actually focus on questions and
Mm.
focus on like what we are seeing beyond just stressing over how our page is looking. And in that journey, during the trip, also the feedback loop was so fast because the first day we were drawing something. The second day we said that we haven't completed this page. So then we learned that, okay, this is not what we learned, what works, what does not work, and improve our techniques for the following day.
So you went with John Muirlaws on a field trip to Tanzania, is that right?
Yes,
Yes.
we went as a group of, I think, 12 people
And you were journaling every day and having
every day.
to journal outside quickly to capture what you were seeing.
Yes, it was like 10 hours of journaling every
Oh, wow.
day. We'd wake up at 6:30, go out. While the car is moving, we'd be sketching. And then we'd
Amazing.
see a cheetah come and then we'd sketch that. And there was just so much happening. And then we'd come back at like 10 o'clock every day. We'd pledge to ourselves that, okay, today, 9:30 we sleep, so tomorrow we can be fresh. And then we see a bunch of people coming there with black lights. And they're like, oh, we are going to go check
Go
out.
spotlight.
And oh my God, like, okay, more journaling. And then
Did you sleep at all?
we would sleep for 3 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think that was the fastest feedback loop.
Yes.
And that's also, I think that trip is also significant for me, especially because I learned how to go away from that pressure of making
Mhm.
my pictures look pretty, because some days you just did not have time for that and it would just be questions and words. And when I look back, those are still my favorite pages
Mm.
because you can see that there was no stress on that page, and it was just about being in that moment and expressing the happiness of, oh my God, I have this cuckoo sitting right in front of me and I cannot take my eyes off it. And that's the day when I stopped. It just was a switch, like it went off and I was like, this is it, this is so fun. And beyond that, we went into practicing. Okay, now we sketch without pencil. Okay, now we stop using an eraser. Okay, now we sketch with a ballpoint pen. So today I feel like we're at a stage where it comes so organically to not think about what tools we are using. I personally use whatever is in front of me and put it on the page. I don't remember the last time I stressed about how my page is looking. And after all of these years, so it's been almost 4 years or 3 years that we've been doing this, and having a goal each year helped us go from drawing a flower that we would draw as a 5 year old to now having like being able to draw animal gaits that I thought I would never be able to draw. So it's just been so exciting. And I personally will, I personally, like Marley also says, I don't like it when people say, oh, you are so talented,
Mhm. Mhm.
because I know like I said, it's been 6 to 7 months of practicing every single day during that phase, and then like finding new things to practice. So I've gone from trying so hard to make my pictures pretty to then focusing on questions to then going back to like, okay, I don't feel like sketching these days, so just drawing, painting. So there's different ways in which I connect. And I think there's no right or wrong way. It's just at different times of your life and journey, depending on all the other things that are happening, you need different ways of connecting with your journal, and it is your journal. So whatever gets you to sketch every day or
Mm.
like put your thoughts on paper, that's more important. And I'm finally learning that.
Yes, yes. And we have this external feeling, don't we, that if someone else says it's okay, or if someone else puts a like on it on social media, it's going to be validated or something like that. But
Oh
it's
yes.
wonderful to hear your and I know it's been a growth process, or it's been an evolution to get to this point, but to hear you say, I'm not talented. I draw this way because I do it every day, and I do it for me, and I do it for the connection with nature. It's not about external validation or
Yeah.
what other people
But
think.
it's a journey. So if people are at that stage where it is about external validation, it's fine, and they will get to a stage where it's not
Mhm.
about that anymore. It's
Mm.
just it's a journey. Everyone goes through it
Yes.
differently.
Yes. And it seems to me, one major thing about your nature journaling process is all about questioning. And yeah, and you wrote an article for International Nature Journaling Week, and you mentioned the infinite loop of curiosity. And I love this expression. And I'd love if you could
Mhm.
talk about falling into this infinite loop and what that means to you.
So by profession, I am a data analyst, and my work involves gathering data, identifying trends and patterns in the data, trying to understand why this is happening, trying to figure what are the other things, what are the other questions that these findings lead to, and then that's a loop that keeps happening. So I've had to train myself to be efficient at my job. I've had to train myself to do that. And when I discovered nature journaling, you'll see how it perfectly maps to how
Mhm.
people say I wonder, I notice, I wonder, and it reminds me of. So I knew that both these sides, my profession will help with my nature journaling, and my nature journaling will help with my profession. Except that because the contexts are so different, it can sometimes be very hard to apply the learnings within different areas. So initially, when I was journaling, I had no idea what I was doing. I was asking questions like, "Oh, how many scales are there on the lizard?" And I'm like, why is that question important at all? Or maybe it is, but at this point, I was like, I don't know where I am going with that question.
Mhm. Mhm.
But we continued to do that till we reached a stage where we started using that information with internet research, and we're like, oh, maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe this is. So, as we started to learn more about the anatomy of the animals, birds, insects, we started to discover what the questions were that we should be asked, what kind of questions are more appropriate or will lead to a deeper rabbit hole, and so on. So, I think we learned how to do this differently over time.
Mhm.
And those questions taught us how to ask better questions. And that's how I discovered the cycle of how I can even go about this.
Yeah, yeah. So early in 2020, you and Akshay adopted a pet,
Yeah.
and it wasn't a puppy or a kitten. It was the most amazing, tiny ghost mantis, and she was this incredible source of fascination and questions and a focal point for your nature journaling. And I'd love for you to speak about her and how she came into your lives and what that meant for your nature journaling.
Thank you, Bethany, for asking my favorite question. I love talking about it. Uh, okay, so the journey started at Wild Wonder conference that happened in person in Monterey. We met this amazing lady whose name is Stephanie Dole. She conducted a class that where she brought her life. So she's an entomologist and she loves beetles. So she got all of her insects. And like I told you, our journey growing up was about seeing an insect, squashing it, and be like, I do not want to see this insect in my house ever again. We met her, and I was like, I'm never going to hold a tarantula in my hand. And she described the feeling, and she said, it's very easy, just try it out. And that was the first time I held a beetle in my hand. I held a tarantula in my hand. And I thought, oh my God, I never thought I could do this. And Akshay was also in that class. So we were both very excited. And then we started hanging out so Stephanie used to also do these bug drawing sessions each week where she would open up her backyard to nature journalists and she would bring out her insects and we would all sit there and sketch. I think our comfort level around insects grew because of her
Yes.
and through those sessions. And we slowly started thinking that, okay, it is so fun to think about the anatomy of the insects when you're seeing them, but it would be so much more fun to actually learn about the behaviors over time. And 2020, the year when COVID started,
Hmm.
was the first few months were so depressing. We just knew this was the perfect time. We are stuck at home. This is the perfect time to run all of the experiments and like learn all about the bugs. So Stephanie told us about where we can get insects from, and we got a mantis. We named our mantis Mithun because the first few days we realized that the mantis was standing and it was pretending to move like a leaf, so it was swaying back and forth. And I said, "Oh my God, he looks like a disco dancer right now." And if you're a Bollywood buff, you would know that there is
Okay.
a very popular Bollywood actor from like our parents' generation. He was called Mithun. So we were like, okay, his name should be Mithun. And at that point, we had no idea about how to identify the gender or like sex or mantis.
Yep.
So that's how our journey started. And there's so many stories that I could talk to about how we started to learn. So we told ourselves we'll only learn from the internet the basic things that are required to keep the mantis alive so we don't kill the poor thing. So we knew we knew what to feed the mantis, how often to feed the mantis, what temperatures to set, but beyond that we had no idea what we were doing. We started gathering data around what the mantis eats. We started taking measurements as every time it went through the process of molting. Then the first time the mantis was molting, it stopped eating for a few days before that, and we were so nervous. We were like, okay, is the mantis going to die? So we started noting all of these observations of it's not moving, it's not eating anything, and 2 days later, the mantis molt. We're like, okay, so let's see if this behavior is correlated with every single time the mantis molts, and that was the first data point that we started collecting about the mantis. Over time we started there were so many different things. We started simulating how the mantis was molting. So we looked at the exoskeleton under a microscope, and we started seeing how and where the exoskeleton is ruptured, and started observing or thinking about how it must probably come out. And there were moments where I was lying down and I'm trying to like, oh my God, will I ever be able to take off my pajamas like that? How did the mantis do this? There were all of these amazing funny moments which I think brought me and Akshay also closer, and
Yeah.
we had all of these back and forths about. So there was this one funny day where I had the mantis held in one hand, and I was wiggling my fingers on the other hand, and I noticed that the mantis jumped on my hand.
Oh wow.
I jumped on my feet. I was like, I don't know how this happened, and I tried that again and again and again, but I noticed that the mantis only jumped when there was some movement happening in front of it.
Ah.
And then that got us thinking, is it how is Mithun even deciding when to jump and when not to jump? and what kind of senses is the insect using to determine that. So actually I was like, okay, let's do like a prey simulation and understand when it jumps versus when it tries to grab. And we sat together and we brainstormed, okay, what are the various factors? Maybe it's the jitter of the insects that causes it to catch the prey versus jump. And we thought of all of these points that could be valid. Akshay wrote up a program to simulate it on the desktop. And we like made this small dot move. We played with the sizes, we played with the colors, with the jitter speed. And we're like, okay, so the one thing that we learned is all of these things are important. And somehow they all contribute to like getting the insect to jump. And then we started reading more about, I don't want to give away what is it that we found, because if someone's listening to this, it would be such a fun thing to learn about the mantis eyes and how they use it to detect the prey versus decide when to jump. um, if you can't find it, ask me for research papers, I will share. It's so fun. So, like, these are things where just by looking at the insect every day, we learn something new about it and we
Yes.
learn the next question to ask. And then we're like, okay, if this is how it moves. And the most exciting part was not asking the questions and then looking up the answers. Of course, sometimes we had to do that to get over the plateau of what to do next. But oftentimes we brainstormed to think of how we could test it. Like, does the sun influence the direction in which the mantis is moving? So, what are the various ways you can experiment with the darkness and the light to see how the insect behaves? And we were thinking of all of these ideas, and that is what made it so exciting because we discovered it.
Yes.
We found it on our own, and now we've never forgotten the whole how the different behaviors took place and why they took place.
I am amazed and so excited. As soon as I saw your pages, your first pages about Mithun, I thought this is magic. This is well, like you say, you can get an app and you can look things up, you can search the internet, but what you've done is created experiments and tested hypotheses and asked all these questions and connected, deeply connected with another creature to understand her, to to form a relationship. And when I say she was tiny, right?
Yes, started off at 2 centimeters in her
Wow.
second star, and then she was as long as my index finger by the time she grew to be an adult.
Oh, wow.
That happened over a period of 15 months. She lived her entire life, and she laid 5 or 6 egg cases, which weren't
Went
fertilized
for it.
because,
Mhm, mhm.
yeah, but like we got to see the entire process. We learned there is this amazing story that I also would like to share about her
Yes,
death.
please.
So we had this other mantis, the Australian rainforest mantis, and that one is pretty big. Even the baby size is as big as my index finger again. So one day we had a spotlight on her and we were allowing her to feed. So we fed her a cockroach, a small cockroach. And she was pink and almost transparent because of the way the spotlight was falling on her. So we could see the underside of it. And we noticed this food going there and getting collected in one spot. And then I noticed that like it stayed there and then there was like a flushing action and it just zoop,
Oh,
went down.
you could almost see inside her digestive system?
We could see the shadow. So it wasn't
Whoa.
clear, but we could
Yeah.
see all of this happening. It was so beautiful. We saw that. I'm like, wait, what is happening? Like, what can we learn about this? And then I started reading about the digestive system and I learned about the crop and the gizzard, where it just takes all of the food, breaks it down into tiny little pieces so the stomach can digest. And I'm like, oh God, we actually saw this happening. We saw the food getting collected in the crop and like and that's my assumption that that is the crop and that's
Yeah.
what is happening. But that observation led us to learn more about the digestive system. And then that got us to thinking, okay, why does our mantis poop? Why does it not urinate? And then we started to learn about the water retention, like how insects do it and what in their body. It just, that whole year was
Mm.
so fun and exciting because of all of the discoveries at different stages. And I think that one year taught us so much more about
Mhm.
insects, and now we don't squish them anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that is so special that you have first overcome your squeamishness to hold things with
Mhm.
Stephanie, and then actually developed this personal relationship with these insects. And after having that journey with Mithun and the following insect, it must have been hard to watch them pass away. Was that a sad moment for you, or were you okay because of the cycle of life?
It was very sad because personally, I've never had a pet before in
Mhm,
my life. I've never had a cat or a dog or
mhm,
anything that I have taken care of. And for moments, I was like, okay, maybe this is how I will be as a mother. I was so scared when I could see like these
mm,
like stressed for some reasons, or I had so many emotions around the first insect that we had. And over time, I learned to, you know, separate it and understand that this happens and we're doing this to learn and for a reason. So I think now I still feel I'm just generally very emotional about everything. So I
mhm.
still feel a little stressed when I see an insect stressed.
Yeah,
But yeah, we got over it, and
yeah.
it was she still I see a ghost mantis, and I think that's still my favorite insect in the whole world because
Yes.
that was my first baby.
Yes, yes, and you went through so much, like, learn I watched a little video the other day of you with the bottle of
Fruit flies.
live fruit
Oh
flies that you had
my
to
gosh,
feed
I saw
her.
that. That was so embarrassing.
And you overcoming, like, "Okay, I've gotta handle these things to feed her," and then, uh, I just loved it that you've learnt so much, you've overcome so much, you've developed so much connection, you've learnt stuff alongside Akshay, and you're what a beautiful, beautiful process. It's so
Yay.
special.
It was so fun. I think the biggest thing I learned out of that whole journey was take something you are really, really afraid of and start journaling it
Mhm.
every day
Mhm.
till it stops scaring you. And
Yes.
you learn how beautiful everything in nature is. And it's all
Yeah.
there for a purpose. I should start journaling bed bugs.
Bedbugs. That might take some some getting used to. I wonder if you think that nature journaling is more of a mindset than anything, because I know that you often do nature journaling as a process for learning. So, you've talked about nature journaling TED Talks, for example, or nature journaling or sketchnoting certain things, and I wonder about that, about nature journaling as a mindset rather than this is what we do, a formula for how to do it. It's more of a way of looking at the world.
That's a hard one because I think, like I said, I've gone through these phases of
Yes.
where I have learned nothing. And I feel like at different moments of life, I've needed days when I just need to sketch and not learn anything. I just
Yeah, sure.
want to see visually and just observe the visual characteristics. And there have been times where I have discovered how learning about it and that whole process of discovering something about a process in nature brings me so much happiness.
Mhm.
So honestly, that whole process and the mindset of like why I even think of questions is because it makes me very, very happy.
Mhm.
But at the same time, there is sometimes that there is some friction in that process of like getting over the hump of okay, asking questions because that can be so hard. And that's when I remind myself what Jack and Fiona say a lot of times that just ask questions without thinking about what the answer is or thinking about, oh my God, I have to go back and answer. I like
Mhm.
to discover answers through observation over time, but sometimes it's okay to just put things on paper and not have an action item after that.
Yes. I'm really keen to chat with you about nature journaling alongside people, because you do it with Akshay and you also do it with this. We're doing it pre-COVID with the community there, and I wonder for you, what happens when you're journaling together with others, and how does that feel as opposed to journaling alone? And do you chat with each other about what you're seeing and deepen your understanding that way?
So, what happens when I'm journaling with someone else is that within a span of half an hour, I get like 20x smarter. And I look at my pages and I'm surprised about how smart, like everything. I'm like, when did I get this intelligent? This is amazing. But recently we went to do some nighttime tide pool journaling with a bunch of people from the community. And I was standing next to Emily Ligren. If you've met
Hmm.
her, she is so brilliant. And we're standing there looking at these muscles, and I am thinking of my questions loud. And I know that she asks a lot of questions. So she starts thinking about her questions loud. And then suddenly we are building on top of each other's
Ah,
questions.
cool.
And then I'm like, oh, I never thought of it like that. I never thought of why the sizes or like the size difference would matter, or like I never thought about why that would happen. And then we start hypothesizing on why that might be happening, start thinking of what are the other places where we've seen something, and then we're like, okay, let's check on the other side of the rock if we see the same behavior. So there's suddenly so many more ideas because I feel like there's a certain way in which we are trained to think, and we all have certain strengths and certain weaknesses. But when you work together as a group, it's everyone combining their
Mm,
strengths and their perspectives on how they see nature. And suddenly everything you're seeing becomes so much better. And I think that was the day I was like, oh gosh, this is amazing how many questions I have about muscles, which I never gave that deep a thought to. So I personally really, really enjoy that process of bouncing ideas off of someone else and thinking through questions and building on top of it. And it gets even more exciting when the other person is also thinking about, oh, but how can we validate it by seeing more examples, or like, hey, let's go there and check if that animal is having this is has the same behavior or whatnot. That process is definitely more exciting.
mhm,
And I think that was the reason why last year for some reason it just felt so difficult, because in 2020 we had Mithun and we had the insect to learn. So we were distracted, but the whole of last year felt so difficult because
mhm,
there was no community aspect to it. And it's so hard to find motivation sometimes to do
mm,
things on your own. And I think the other thing that I get also from working in a community is, for example, when we go to nature journaling with Marley, he always asks, the first thing he asks is, what is your intention today? And sometimes I don't have an intention, and it's like in that moment I'm like, oh my god, I don't have an intention today, let's make something up. But I think it also holds me accountable and excited because it's so inspiring to see that other people don't just think of this as this is something I do every day, but
mhm,
there's so much more. There's so much more elements that they add to it, like, oh, I want to do this because I want to think about conservation, or this is what I'm practicing on today. And that whole contribution around, like, this is what I want to do with nature journaling and this is where I want to take it, is so inspiring that it gets you to question where you want to take it. And I think that's been one of my favorite things about being in this community also, because now we start to think about, we did an audit of everything that goes in our trash to just see where we can reduce our trash. So there's a whole journaling session we did
mm,
where every time we added something we gathered data on it. So just simple things like taking it, and when you love and care about something so much, just thinking about how you can take that learning and make something bigger out of it, and where can you apply those learnings. And I think all of those for me comes from being surrounded by these amazing people who think about nature journaling not just as a hobby, but how they can change their lifestyles and influence others to love, care about nature and
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love there's 2 elements in there. There's the idea that you're sort of pooling your brain resources, which is such a lovely thing, and then you're encouraging each other to think in different directions that you might not have gone in because of your own background, your own way of thinking, and that's amazing. And then this idea that you're inspiring each other to care in different ways and you're inspiring each other to take it further. And I love that you're doing a trash audit and that nature journaling can be part of that to keep track of it. That's so, so special.
and there's one more part that I would like to add to that. I think most of the pages that I built today, sure, there's some aspect of it that comes from like just me doing things, but I think 95% of it is inspired by how other people build their pages. We've met
Mhm,
people
mhm.
who say, we met JP, who's so good with how she does her page layouts. And those people are willing to share all of their tricks of how they get to it. We see all of these people trying to like Amy Schlasser. She's one of my favorite nature. I look forward to seeing her pages every time I talk to her. And like I love how she puts diagrams, and everyone has such different ways of learning that it just expands your skill set without putting it's zero effort to look into someone else's pages and think about all of the things that you appreciate about their page that you can incorporate in your.
Yeah.
So it just helps me grow so much.
Yes, and there's a very much a culture of sharing and giving around that, and everyone who you ask in this nature journal community to share something with you or explain something, there's this very immediate openness to and willingness to share, which I just love so much.
I agree. I love
One of the things that you did was you created a little video, and it was about it was for the website How to Teach Nature Journaling, and
that.
you both did a little video about making a comic. And I love this idea. And I haven't used comics as a method in my nature journal, but I was
Me-
watching. I was watching yours and it was so inspiring and I love the way you did it. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, creating the video and using comics.
that was the first time we tried to build educational content around
Mhm.
journaling. And Akshay, so my husband is very good at, so our styles are very different. He's very into simplifying things, and that's where he looks at the subject and understands it so deeply to think about what are the key characteristics that I need to keep to still make it look like the thing that I'm drawing, yet simplify it and add the least number of lines. And I tend to draw more on like how can I make it look like what I'm seeing in front of me. um, so for me, it was such a learning experience to think about how he thinks about cartooning and how he thinks about building a comic. And then we sat together, read through several resources on what are the various elements that are even needed to make something look like a comic. And that was my first attempt building a comic. And it was very exciting because it was very different from how I approach
Yes.
nature journaling.
So there's these little things you use to just like some tick marks to indicate movement and
Yes.
some words to show
Yeah.
to emphasize what the sound was and things
Yeah,
like that, which were really useful.
yeah. Yeah, those were some of the things like having sound. So sound is something that,
Mhm.
so I don't tend to still like do the comic style, but there's so many elements out of that that I've carried forward, and now I add more sounds. And
Mhm.
suddenly, if something's falling, I'm like a thud and a boom and whatnot.
Yeah.
So all of that adds a lot of drama to the pages.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we've been doing some of that. Then there is having large dramatic lettering.
Mm-hmm.
Amaya does a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
and I see her pages. I'm like, oh my God, she's adding these big balloon letters. Um, then adding also the placements of where your main subject is and adding perspective. So there's so much understanding of perspectives and the element of how to create drama that came on those pages.
Yeah, I really want to do that. I want to start borrowing from those ideas because my pages just tend to be just whatever's most interesting to me in the moment. I put that down somewhere on the page and then it just sort of spreads out. But I really admire pages that are more structured and have these extra elements in them, and I want to start doing that on my pages too. Your video is really inspiring. I loved seeing that.
Oh, thank you.
So you said recently that you've been going through a bit of a period of nature journal burnout, and that now you're coming out the other side of that with like a renewed enthusiasm and energy. And I wonder if you would be happy to talk about how you came to this place of burnout and now how you're coming out of it.
So I think I try to think so much about how I came to that place. And I think a lot of it is not, it wasn't even coming from nature journaling itself.
Mhm.
And last year, isolation and not getting to meet, like I said, I derive so much of my inspiration and motivation to nature journaling through the community. And sometimes, if I'm not going there to sketch, I'm going there to see my friends and seeing
Mhm.
their excitement around being in nature. And that wasn't happening last year. There was also so many things happening at work. So it just, to put time in it, got a little hard.
Mhm. Mhm.
And while that was happening, Akshay, so again, this human, the human thing to start comparing with everyone.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I'm sitting, I'm like, okay, Akshay is equally busy. How is he putting in all this time and effort? And I think he really sped up in his journaling, the investment the whole of last year. He started doing more comics, more more stuff. So I am looking at all of that and I'm feeling so much pressure of,
Mhm.
oh my God, why am I not feeling the same level of excitement? And why, when someone asks me, what are you excited to sketch today? I feel like that is so much pressure for me
Mhm.
personally because my excitement does not come from looking at something and being like, okay, I love this and I'm so excited about this. My excitement comes from spending time with it and like be like, okay, I'm drawing a cactus, sure. And then I start to discover things and I start to ask questions and I'm like, oh my God, who
Yes.
thought a cactus could be this exciting?
Yes.
And then I get excited about it. But this, the way we get excited about things is so different from person to person.
Yes.
And in that journey, I was comparing that process of what excites me versus what excites someone else and why do I
Mhm.
not feel excited about those same things. And that just went on a loop and I was like, oh gosh, I need to come out. And the way I dealt with it last year was, okay, I'm going to take a break and I'm not going to sketch this subject for a while. And
Yeah.
that slowly turned into, oh God, I still can't shut my brain off. So I'm going to not meet. So I have this very sweet friend that I made through nature journaling, and she sent me as a Christmas gift. She sent me this small piece of slime mold, which I was supposed to activate last year, but I did not. And if she's listening, she'll know that I still haven't contacted her because I've been shaming myself so much for not having activated the slime mold. I'm like, oh gosh, uh, I should get to it at some point, and I should get to it at some point because we had this whole thing about how she will name her slime mold nobody. I will name my slime mold somebody, and then we'll talk about, did you ship somebody yet? Like, how's nobody doing? And it just sounds so funny. Uh, but I didn't get to it, and there was suddenly so much shame associated with nature journaling, and it all originated from my head of like
Yes.
comparing
Too much pressure.
and the fact that I stopped doing it for a month, that turned into 2 months, that turned into 3 months. And at some point, I just realized that I have not been doing this. And I feel
Mm.
very disconnected from everyone and from my journaling. And it started to affect. my emotional health, and I just had to get back to it.
Mm.
So I am now, in the past 1 or 2 months, slowly starting to get back to the practice. And what I found the easiest thing to do was, like I said, I personally feel no friction in sitting in one place and sketching. So I started with just watercolors. I'm just
Mhm.
sitting and drawing a building in front of me or drawing a tree. And that slowly turned into drawing something else. And slowly I got back to drawing a bird. I drew the bird and I was like, okay, it does not look two dimensional. I used to be able to do this 2 years ago, or like until last year, my bird looked a little more alive. And I knew that it's looking flat and I'm missing that element of function, dimensionality. I'm like, I have studied this. So I think in the last 2 months, I could see my drawings suddenly get so much better because I was not learning any new techniques, but I was picking up the techniques that I had learned when I had first learned how to sketch and going back to the basics. And that I did not even realize when it went from just casual sketching to, oh my God, I want to learn how to, okay, now I want to see if I can get the zebra right. Now I want to see if, so I slowly went from that stage. So I started with something that was very easy for me to do and like did not give me stress. Moved back to like sketching
Mm.
animals again. Now I'm going back to finally thinking about, okay, let's go back to the learning aspect of it and go back to asking questions. And like I said, my first instinct is not to see something and be like, oh my God, I'm curious about these 100 different things or excited about these things. I have to take myself there. So when
Yes.
Jack says force yourself to ask 10 questions, that is my strategy. I have to force myself to ask 10 questions to then find 10 more questions. And now I feel like I have the emotional and mental energies to start forcing myself to do that again. And that's how I'm getting back.
I love that you said start with something that feels safe. Start with something that feels simple that you know how to do, and then you can build on that and layer it on until you're back to that point where this is something coming from inside that's bringing joy, that's making you excited. And yeah, I love that. And your pages lately have just been so full of energy, and
Ah,
your animals are just popping off the page. I love seeing what you're doing at the moment. So you've been using also, I think Tim Pond's book,
oh,
to
yes.
explore animals.
Yes. I have read through that book before. Like I said, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we were practicing to be in Africa and drawing how to learn mammals, that's when we purchased the book and I had studied it and I knew what I was doing. And then it just, because I didn't study on any of it, I forgot. And now I have to go
Yeah.
back and start again. But I'm reading the same content more, and I swear I'm learning new things that I hadn't learned before. And I'm like, how is it that I'm reading the same paragraph, but getting different things out of it 2 years down the line and then 2 years down the line? And he's so structured in his book about how he is talking about going back to the basic shapes and this one simple exercise of just keep a cylinder in front of you or keep like a string in front of you, um, and just turn it in different directions and see how the lines curve. I've just been using that technique
Mm,
and forcing myself to draw this using that cylinder technique and drawing like the curves everywhere. I'm like, oh, suddenly the wrinkles are falling in the direction they're supposed to fall. So really going back to the basic and drawing those basic skeletons before I actually put the
mm-mm.
animal on top. So again, I'm back to taking like 5 minutes or 10 minutes to draw a single animal because I'm relearning how to do that.
Yeah. Isn't that wonderful that you can come to a resource like a book or a video or whatever it is, and you can relearn something, but it's as if you're learning it for the first time because you're in a different place. You're in a different place with your skills, you're in a different place mentally, and
Yes.
it's like it's coming alive again.
It's like that story of how my mom used to tell me the story of this ant trying to climb the wall and then it falls and then it climbs again. I think I went to a stage where I was so comfortable with drawing animals that I didn't have to think twice, and then I didn't do it for so many months, and now I'm starting from scratch, and I still feel wonderful about it because it's the progress that's exciting, and suddenly I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
went from no animal to something like an animal.
Mm-mm.
It's just so fun.
It has been amazing to talk to you. You have brought so many just joyful stories. My cheeks are hurting from smiling so much. It's been
Thank
so wonderful.
you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Bethany.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Gargi. I found this interview so enjoyable. Gargi's stories made me laugh, and her insights into the ups and downs of nature journaling made me really think a lot. When she spoke about not immediately falling into that place of curiosity when she's standing in front of something new is really true. I think of it like turning on a switch, or deliberately deciding to be curious and searching out an entry point, something that's going to trigger that curiosity to turn on. And the phrasing Gargi used was perfect. She said, I have to take myself there. Yes, that's exactly it. We can take ourselves there by just asking the first question and then the next one and the next one until we realize, like she said, that this cactus in front of me is actually super interesting, or this tiny ghost mantis is the world's most incredible insect, and there's endless and astonishing things to uncover here. Please do follow the links in the show notes to find some of Gargi's amazing pages on Instagram, and I especially recommend you read the blog post she wrote for International Nature Journaling Week, where she describes all the experiments and discoveries that they made about Mithun the ghost mantis. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.